Folks, hello again. The COP26 climate summit in Glasgow was supposed to save the world. But what happens when some of the major world leaders just don't care about it? Well, that seems to have been the case. Let's start with China. With a population of 1.4 billion people, it is by far the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases. President Xi Jinping didn't even turn up to Glasgow. Russia, population of about 146 million people, is the fourth largest emitter of carbon dioxide. Where was the President Vladimir Putin? Back home in Moscow, nowhere near the climate summit. The country's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told journalists at the G20 summit in Rome this month that 2050 was a magic figure promoted by the European Union and certain other countries, but other nations had the right to set their own dates by which to reduce emissions. Both China and Russia have instead claimed 2060 as a more likely target. Does anyone actually believe them? Of course not. This was Barack Obama from Glasgow.
The ratcheting up of ambition that we anticipated in Paris 6 years ago has not been uniformly realized. I have to confess, it was particularly discouraging to see the leaders of two of the world's largest emitters, China and Russia, decline to even attend the proceedings. And their national plans so far reflect what appears to be a dangerous lack of urgency, a willingness to maintain the status quo on the part of those governments. And that's a shame.
India is the third largest emitter of CO2, a country of 1.2 billion people. Its leader, Narendra Modi, was at Glasgow, but set his target even further into the future, net zero by 2070. So that's a big fat no to net zero by 2050 for three of the four largest emitters of greenhouse gases on the planet. In fact, I'll go a little further. Just 12 members of the G20 have committed to that mid-century target. By that measure, we've got a problem, if what Prince Charles said prior to the event is true.
COP26 begins in Glasgow tomorrow. Quite literally, it is the last chance saloon.
In the end, what did the summit actually achieve? Well, in Australia's case, absolutely nothing, because it was completely overshadowed by Scott Morrison's public spat with French President Emmanuel Macron. But as it turns out, he's one of the few who actually committed to net zero. As hundreds of leaders, business types and royals fly in and out of the summit in their private jets and make a bunch of pledges that may or may not come true, you can't blame people for claiming hypocrisy is at work here. Do as I say, not as I do may come to mind. And leading activist Greta Thunberg has called that out too, referring to COP as a flop, which really isn't that surprising, despite pledges to cut methane emissions from cattle and 100 nations vowing to end deforestation.
The COP has turned into a PR event where leaders are giving beautiful speeches and announcing fancy commitments and targets, while behind the curtains, the governments of the global north countries are still refusing to take any drastic climate action.
Climate is complicated. It's hard enough getting a single government to agree on what the answer is, let alone asking the whole world to move in the same direction. Take coal, for instance. Australia isn't part of any commitment to phase it out. We will continue to mine it for a while longer because demand is there. As long as someone is willing to buy a product, it'll stay on the market. That's business. But it'll work alongside emerging technologies such as wind, solar, etc., until the demand dries up. Our coal model infuriates opponents, some of who suggest we should go nuclear. That's another argument. So with climate policies bogged in the mud, what it most likely means is that the work will fall to the private sector, enabled by government. Fortunately, that's already been underway for decades, helped by states too. Take energy, agriculture and transport, for example. Look at the massive changes we've seen in the past 10 years. That's the encouraging part, and the great hope that technological developments, many of which haven't even been invented yet, by the way, will steer us clear of a temperature rise of 1.5 degrees. Oh, and some more ambition from those three big emitters would help too. Maybe in time for COP27, eh? Can't wait. Folks, thanks for watching. Please support this channel by liking, sharing and subscribing below, and I'll see you next week.